G'day YouTube, Warbles on a lot here. Not in the usual location. After all, how often do I show you a Sydney City monorail? But what else would you expect to find? When you come to what used to be the Inverell Transport Museum, it's now the National Transport Museum, which can be found on Rifle Range Road at Inverell. And I haven't figured out what I'm going to call this yet, but those of you familiar with the channel may be aware that I am about to make a pilgrimage. I'm going to go and visit my first aeroplane. A little bit tight cast. Pocahontas beside the Indian motorcycles. Oh, look at this. Just a little bit different to the one that I drive. But anyway, it's good to see that I'm not the only fruitlet getting around the place with solar panels on the roof of the car. What is it now? 13, 14 years after I started. So, we have a sign that tells us where to go. I suppose we might as well prolong the anticipation by taking the scenic route. Oh, gee, they've done an excellent job on this place. Not quite certain how the wedding cakes fit in the transportation theme, but it's nice to see it. Somebody's put it there. And we have something of a restaurant. And because we're not actually here to look at the motoring cars, I'm not going to stop and talk about anything that I recognise unless it's really exotic. But there truly is endless hours of fascination. Yippee, look at this, a 1906 Dayton buggy, an actual horseless carriage. Okay. A penny farthing and a what the hell is that? Good to see the bicycle connection. And again, what the hell is that? Ah, Glenninus to Inverell black and white mail car. Yeah. I'm going to cheat. There's another whole row of them. I really love the lighting in here. And look at that. Somebody has put almost all of an ultralight up there. It looks to me like we're missing the rear lift struts. Looks to be a Xenoa engine. Looks like we had a little bit of battle damage there. No idea whose that is. No idea what it is. And yes, I'm teasing, I'm tantalising, I'm working up to it. Wow. Somebody's put some time and money into this. Okay, we have an MG. We have a Toyota Sports 800. I've never seen one of them. Not ever. Okay. So we get the idea of the place, we get the theme of the place. Once again, I'm not quite certain of the exact precise transport connection of the doll display or the bridle display. But it's a very nice display. Yeah, model trains, I can see the transport connection there. No doubt Hermann Goering would approve and appreciate and be envious of that setup. He had a fairly famously extensive train set at Carranall. Have I said how impressed I am with the lighting in this place? It really is beautiful. Endless motoring cycles all over the place. All labelled, all clean. I'm just going to guess they probably all run too. All with a drip tray. Oh, good God. There's a drop of oil. There's another one. So that proves they actually do run. And there's one with a drip but no tray. Of course it's a Honda. Oh my God. A Cossack 650. I've heard horror stories about these things. They imported them into Australia and they had round section cylindrical pistons. And in Australia, such things get sufficiently hot, you have to grind them oval with the flat side where the gudgeon pin support is, so the extra metal can heat up and expand into round. And people used to buy these things in Sydney and take off in them, and they wouldn't get as far as Parramatta before they seized the bloody engine in Australian temperatures. At least so goes the story. Can't really vouch for it, but it may be true. Fix or repair daily, Ford. Other people say found on rubbish dump. But they were the first successfully mass-produced motor car. Oh, we're getting close to the purpose of the visit now. Okay, right. I have done the entire bloody museum. We've looked at it all. Now, let us make a pilgrimage to visit my first aeroplane. The 8 horsepower 1975 Red Baron Skycraft Scout. The world's first legal minimum aircraft. and it's missing its tail wheel. And it's got a new assembly on the skid post. Interesting. You can see the square edge fitting that's supposed to go down to the tail wheel, which is supposed to be steerable. And yeah, I would say that's a different piece of aluminium that's been put in there. The grey patches of sailcloth, I sewed those on in 1978 because I had been carrying it on the roof rack of my Morris 1100, and I had the wing leading edge spars tied on beside the fuselage spar, and between Barrel and Glen Innes they rubbed the fabric off, so I had to come up with a repair. Got to say that exhaust manifold's a replacement. It's a different unit to the way the thing was when I left it. That white propeller is a replacement for the one that I repaired, but there it is, possibly the only Pixie Minor aero engine on the planet. There was only ever two others. The first one did not have a reduction gear. It was in the first pre-production prototype Skycraft Scout in 1975, and because it had no reduction drive, it would not get off the ground. The second Pixie Minor 120cc 8 horsepower Victor Lawnmower engine, it try to get, that's a bit better. Trouble is there's so much bloody light. There we go. As I was saying, the second Pixie Minor in the second pre-production prototype, it did fly at Waverley, but the Department of Transport Air Safety Bureau got wind of it, and they said to Ron Wheeler, if we catch you doing that again, we're going to prosecute you and put you in jail. And he said, well, don't do that. Instead, wait a bit longer. And in January 1976, he invited them to come and have a look at this thing. He said, I'm going to show you what I built, and I want you to come and tell me why it should be illegal for us to play with these things as long as we stay a long way away from anywhere. Oh dear, oh bloody dear. Would you look at that? Somebody has arbitrarily added dihedral to the tail. That should not be that way. It should be an absolutely perfect cruciform tail with 90-degree corners. I have no idea how or why they did that. Obviously it's got to do with that ring in the unpainted aluminium tail skid. It changes the angle of the dangle. Nobody's going to fly it, so it doesn't matter that it's not quite right. It's only for display purposes. I imagine all the rib stitching as being cotton is no longer trustworthy. So anyway, the Department of Transport showed up in January and they had a look at this. And as Ron Wheeler had figured, they were so busy rolling about the floor laughing at the colour scheme and the idea of somebody who thought he was a Red Baron flying behind a bloody lawnmower engine, that they could not think of a decent reason why anybody should be stopped from playing with these things. You've never to be ashamed if what you say or do is written down and published, especially if what is written is not true. Yeah, it's 1975, not 1974. It's not one of the, well, yeah, okay. You could call it one of the first because there were two before it. But W-H-A-R-T-O-N. I think, I would have thought it was 1982 rather than 83, but it might have been 83. Must have been 82 because my father died in September 82 and he was the one who sold it. So anyway, the Department of Transport Air Safety Bureau went back to Canberra and they sat and they thought, and they decided that Air Navigation Order 95.10 should say that it was lawful to fly machines that weighed less than 400 pounds on takeoff, as long as they didn't go over 300 feet from terrain, as long as they were not flown over a sealed road, as long as they weren't flown within 5 miles of an airport or controlled airspace, as long as they didn't overfly municipal areas, public meetings, race meetings or regattas. So in August 1976, ANO 95.10 was gazetted, and Australia became the first place in the world where it was lawful for unlicensed pilots to fly uncertified aircraft within those limits. And I thought that was bloody marvellous. And in 1978, when I was working at Old Barrel Airfield, the original idea was I was supposed to get a flying lesson for every day I worked scraping the paint off the wings of a tiger moth. I had 2 flying lessons, one 20 minutes, one 15, one 25 and one 10 minutes, in a Piper Cub and a hornet moth. And then after that I worked there for a couple of weeks, several months later, and the boss was too busy and he didn't get time to take me flying, and he offered me money, and I said no, I offered to work for nothing, for the fun of being around the old aeroplanes. And we argued a bit more, and eventually it was decided that this could be my pay for working at Old Barrel Airfield, and I was going to have to make it up with some money, and you know, some of that happened and some of it didn't, and some of it was later forgiven. But yeah, November 1978, 17th of November 1978, I put the wings on it after I'd burnt up a tank of fuel, taxiing it without the wings. Then I taxied another tank of fuel with the wings on, and I had some lunch, and then I filled the fuel tank again, and I went out, and this thing taught me how to fly. It took me at least this high off the ground, maybe even as high as it is now. I don't know that I ever got it quite as nose down as it is at the moment, because I was trying not to bend it, and I didn't. I broke the propeller when I had it on the roof of the car, and I went under a low gate. That's why I had to repair the propeller, and I didn't do a perfect job, because later on, when Terry Griffey was trying to fly it, the propeller bolts broke, and the propeller made a flight of its own. And after that, he didn't ever try again, because ultralights had got a lot better than this. And when they opened this place, he said, well, mate, I've got this really old primitive microlight, ultralight minimum aircraft thing. Would you like me to lend that to you and put it in your museum? And there it is. It's been there for 20 years now. I first made a pilgrimage to it in about 1995, something like that. And in a sense, it still defines me. I am the last person who flew the world's first legal minimum aircraft. 8 horsepower, 2-axis controls, single surface aerofoils, no internal structure inside the wings, no wing ribs, just bent aluminium tubes in sail pockets sewn into the dacron like sail battens on a sailing boat. All flying cruciform tail, no fin, no horizontal stabilisers, 1 ignition switch, 1 throttle, no instruments. Elevator and rudders on the joystick. It had a few problems. One of the problems you can see right there, single swaged flying and landing wires, only 1 bit of lead. That is what you call sailing boat practice. This one has been retrofitted with a double swage on the drag wire that runs from behind the engine mount out to the leading edge spar, which is what keeps the dacron so drum tight against those lacing wires. And you have to strap it in and stretch the dacron until those 2 sheet metal tangs hook up. And you lace above the level of the spar, and then below the level of the spar, and then come down onto that little aluminium carrier pipe. And that's how you make sure that you've got the camber or curvature held into the wing. This is a Mark 1. It has no lateral control at all. The Mark II had no lateral control at all. The Mark III had wing warping. It was introduced in about 1983. I'm hoping you can see that there are double swages on the drag wire, silhouetted against the leading edge spar, whereas there's only a single swage on the flying wires. The reason I'm going on about this is that several of the production model Mark I's, which came after this, they had the single swage drag wires, and they had the 160cc 12.5 horsepower Pixie Major aero engine, the vibration of which was sufficient to loosen the swages on the single swage drag wires. And I think at least 3, it might have been 5 of the Mark I's, lost that anti-drag wire on the leading edge of the wing, which allows that wing on that side to fold back against the tail, and then you just spiral down and go splat. The other thing that used to go wrong with these was the stabilised spiral dive, because you've got all the weight of the pilot underneath the centre of pressure with a high dihedral, and if you get the nose down and if you're turning, you can't pull out of a stabilised spiral dive because you've got no ailerons. You get into a situation where the pendulum stability of being in a turn holds you in the bank angle, and the nose is down. You can push the nose further down, you can pull the nose up, and then you'll stall and spin in. So yeah, spiral dives wiped out a lot of people, and eventually, by 1983, Ron Wheeler got the message and he put wing warping on the Skycraft Scouts. But by that stage, once again, you could buy a much better aeroplane with about the same amount of money, and you didn't have to be a really careful, experienced test pilot to keep yourself out of trouble. And the sort of person who knew enough to stay safe in one of these things just couldn't be bothered playing around with it after they'd done it a few times. They wanted to be able to do something like fly over and visit a friend rather than just fly around and around the same paddock. So between one thing and another, I would be surprised if there are any Mark I Scouts still flying. 10 years ago there was one in Western Australia and there was one for sale in New Zealand. But anyway, at age 61 I have made another pilgrimage to visit my first aeroplane. And I'm very bloody pleased to do it too. After all, how many people can make a pilgrimage to go and visit the National Transport Museum and walk around in circles under their first aeroplane, trained up to the roof where it can't hurt anybody? Kind of a pity I didn't go around to bringing my mother over here before she died. She probably sold one of those machines. She was the local Elna sewing machine representative from middle 1960s to pretty much till Elna went off the market. Singer and Faff, Princess. Yeah. Okay. What a lovely little transport museum indeed. They won't close up in 15 minutes. To be honest, I really can't think of anything truly intelligent much more to say. I've had quite a good day. Now I'll just go down to Coffs Harbour and try and survive radiotherapy and chemotherapy for 7 more weeks. And maybe I'll come back here and have another look later on a different day. So, Warbles on all at the YouTube, thank you for joining me on this pilgrimage to visit my first aeroplane, whose photo still lives in my wallet, because once a Biggles fantasist, always a Biggles fantasist. So I might as well admit it. Warbles on a lot to YouTube. Ciao.